My name is Brian Boteo, a planner with the Fairfax County Department of Planning and Development. We're here tonight meeting about the West Falls Church TSA plan amendment. First, I'd like to introduce Supervisor John Faust. I know you have a couple of words you'd like to say to the task force before we begin, and after that, I can go over our agenda.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. And literally just a few words because I know how much work you have ahead of you. I put this on my schedule. I thought it would probably be to thank you profusely for contributing so much time and effort over the past couple of years. With recent developments, I would not be surprised if task force asked for another meeting. But I will say that I can't tell you how much we appreciate the sacrifices that you've made, David, your leadership and everybody's participation. Everything has been so much harder over the past year than what it should have been or could have been, but for the virus. And, this is one of the most, as it turned out, it was a very complicated process. A lot of issues came up that would normally not come up in a planning process, and you handled them extremely well, in my opinion. I think you've gotten us to a good place, and we all know that this is the beginning of this is the end of the beginning, I think is what they would say. You've had a lot of community input. You as a task force team have made a lot of good decisions, I think, over the past several months, years. But it is now at the point you get when you get to the point where you say this is what we recommend, it will become, there will be more opportunity. And I hope you stay involved because no one knows this plan better than you do. But there will be a lot of community discussion, participation, questions that will need to be answered. And ultimately, and I know you know this, public hearings, formal hearings at the Planning Commission where there will be a recommendation made, and at the Board of Supervisors where there will be a vote on whether to accept the plan. So, it's all, the recent development with HIT Construction deciding not to go forward with an agreement with Virginia Tech was, for me, very disappointing. You can't put your heart into who the players are going to be because that's not what land use planning is about. Our role is to plan for something that is good for the community, and it doesn't matter who the user is. But it really was, I was kind of excited about the fact that we HIT Construction because just solidly good people, great community members, type of company you would want to be working with. But I also appreciate that a deal's a deal, and when there's no deal, they walk, and we're left, in terms of planning, in my opinion, exactly where we were before they left. In terms of, am I disappointed that we're not going to have HIT working with Virginia Tech? Yeah, definitely. So anyway, all those things, and I appreciate Lemon Road Civic Association has been on top of this and sent some really good stuff to us that we've been able to, I hope, if not get, the ultimate answers. I just hope we're, we've gotten to the point where we can move forward in a planning mode, not necessarily a rezoning mode, but a planning mode. So, and I cannot not thank staff. Wow, this has been quite a ride. Nobody anticipated this when we started down this path. So thank you all. So anyway, I'm going to stick around for the meeting, but I wanted to say how much we all appreciate the contributions that you're all making to our community. Thank you. Back to you, David.
Thank you, John. We appreciate it. We'll try to give you something worth watching and hope it's not like another.
Bore me.
No, it's just going to be like binge watching, I'm afraid, the way we keep going on. The next item here is adoption of the minutes, but Ben and I had an email exchange before and regarding whether or not there'll be a next meeting. And Brian and Ben, does it make sense to me to address that up front, I think?
Sure,
Okay.
yeah, I think
Yeah,
that
I
makes
think
sense.
so.
Okay. A lot of people had concerns about the fact that we would be hearing certain explanations for the first time now, such as the implications of VDOT and HIT arrangement falling through, what that meant to the analysis and how we would do it and why. Perhaps things involving the transportation impact analysis, traffic impact analysis, and it's not being completed, and how does that dovetail with our responsibilities to finish up, and a bunch of things that maybe are kind of new, and I think people on the other side of which I've come to start referring to as the east of I-66 crowd. Not in any deprecatory way, but I have to group you somehow. I know you have a lot of concerns too about winding up tonight and want to discuss some things. So all of that is by way of saying that we will not be holding a vote on this, a final vote on this tonight. What I do hope, though, is this, that if there are any outstanding issues, we discuss them thoroughly tonight and resolve them. And that doesn't mean necessarily to everybody's satisfaction, but we can't keep debating the same issues over and over again, one meeting after another. We've been meeting now for, not counting the first meeting 3 years ago this month, we've been meeting, for over 2 years now, 2.25 years, with some hiatuses, and we just can't keep beating this around the bush. So I mean, at one point, at some point, what we get to is, are we each going to be satisfied with the plan as it is now drawn up, so that we feel that it is in the best interest of our communities to accept it, or do we feel it's in the best interest of our communities to not accept it? And we're just going to have to deal with it as it's finally written, and not worry about a lot of other things that sidetrack us. So what I'm hoping is that next time we will have these things all resolved in some way or another as to how staff's going to handle it at this meeting, and we can just have the task members. What I'd like to do next time is have task members kind of just discuss their interactions with their own communities and what kind of issues came up, and tell us how they're voting on this and just what informed their vote. But that's next time. So that's where we are on that, just so that everybody doesn't obsess about this for the next hour and a half before somebody says something about it. So Brian, I think in that case, I will turn this over to you to do the meeting minutes.
Well, I just wanted to cover the remainder of the agenda real quick.
Oh,
just to
sure.
remind folks who, so first we'll begin with the meeting minutes. Following that, Dwayne Taylor from Virginia Tech would like to address the task force. And we're just planning on setting aside a few minutes for that, and he's available to answer some questions that folks may have. And following that, Bob Pecora from the Fairfax County Department of Transportation has just a few short slides he'd like to present to folks that mostly relate to the information that I distributed by email last Thursday to the task force regarding questions about the transportation impact analysis. Following that, I'll give an update summarizing the edits to the draft comprehensive plan that were circulated last week and posted online. And then finally, well, not finally, after that, there will be a task force discussion and questions related to the plan amendment, and then we'll open it up as we always do for members of the public to make comment or ask questions. And so I guess with that, actually, David, I'll turn it over to you for the meeting minutes. I did distribute those to the task force last week.
Okay, sure. I assume that everybody has taken a look at them. Does anybody have any comments or objections to any of them? I guess I need to, hold on a second. Do this so that I can see if anybody's got their hands raised. I'm not seeing any. If you don't have any, I'm just going to call for a vote on them. Well, will somebody make a motion that we accept the minutes as written? Can somebody do that on the task force?
I move we accept the minutes as written.
Okay, can we have a second on that?
We
Somebody-
accept the minutes.
Okay, that's a sec. Okay, so now what I'd like to do is, I don't think we really need to have yays and nays. If anybody either wishes to abstain or to say no, just please let me know, either by raising your hand or just speaking up.
David, I will abstain since I was not attending the last meeting.
Okay, I'm sorry, is that Chris? Oh, yeah, okay.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so we have one abstention. Anybody else? Okay, I'm going to consider the meetings have passed with one abstention. And let's see, where does that leave us now?
That leaves us with
With the Virginia Tech?
that's right. So
Okay, Brian, go ahead. Why don't you?
so I'd like to turn over to Dwayne Taylor from Virginia Tech to address the task force. I know we circulated their statement that they had published online, but I just wanted to give him the opportunity to address the task force directly.
Good evening. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes,
Okay, great. Thank you.
I can anyway.
Again, thank you, Brian. My name is Dwayne Taylor, and I serve as the Assistant Vice President for Capital Construction for Virginia Tech. And I'm actually filling in this evening for David Baker, who normally attends these meetings with you, who could not join you this evening. So I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. And I'd like to open with the statement that Virginia Tech is very proud of its 26-year history in the Falls Church community. And I'd like to reemphasize our commitment to staying in Falls Church in Fairfax County. As you've heard and briefly discussed this evening, Virginia Tech and HIT Construction, or Converge West Falls LLC, mutually decided late this past February not to move forward with the proposal for the redevelopment of our Falls Church campus. And it's important, I think, to remind the task force that the proposal was submitted as an unsolicited PPA. And after a period of due diligence and intensive business analysis, it was determined that it was in neither party's best interest to move forward with this project. And that said, we know our property is a critical connector between the planned development of the City of Falls Church property and the WMATA property. And we've emphasized to both partners our commitment to supporting their planned redevelopment in any and every way possible. This includes allowing access for the development of Commons Avenue connecting the properties. And you may have also seen that thanks to Senator Dick Saslaw and the City of Falls Church, our Virginia Tech Transportation Institute, or as it's also known, VTTI, will be partnering with the city to create a new smart road test bed along Commons Avenue. Planning for this project will likely kick off later this summer, and we will definitely engage with the communities in the city and the county as project specifics and details and a timeline for deployment begin to solidify. And while we don't have a timeline for when the redevelopment of our campus will move forward, having the comp plan language approved as it's currently before you this evening will greatly help our process. Again, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here and to update you on Virginia Tech's Falls Church campus.
Thank you very much, Dwayne. We appreciate it. Brian, should we, do we want to take questions from task force members on this for Dwayne?
Yeah, Edwin, if you're available for a couple of
Yeah.
questions.
Okay, anybody want to ask anything more about that from the task force? Raise your hand or just speak up.
Cheryl has
It's
it.
Cheryl.
Cheryl, okay, please.
I appreciate that you said that you'll ask the comp plan to be approved as is. The one thing that we were questioning concerning the Virginia Tech property was the height of the buildings. Do you guys have a preferred height that you know that you'll be better able to get contractors
Well,
in?
that, you hit the nail on the head. Our preference is to ensure that the property remains as attractive as possible to future partners, which we will definitely be interested in engaging with. And so I believe that the height that is currently, and I'll be candid with you, I don't recall what it is off the top of my head, but what I believe is currently written in the comp plan agreement or comp plan amendment is reflective of that ability. So again, thank you very much for the opportunity to answer that question.
The last number that we had was 105, 105 feet. Is that the request? You do know that the Falls Church building directly next to you, I received their request and they're going for 150 feet. And it looks as though that is going to be approved for the Falls Church property. I think that was your original, no, your original request was 115 and you brought it down to 105. We just need to know.
Cheryl, yeah, Cheryl and Dwayne, let me just interject and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. I believe what we have approved so far in the text is 145, except for the portion that fronts the villages, and that's 105. Brian or anybody want to correct me on that? I'm pretty sure that's correct.
That's correct, David.
Okay. Thank you, Cheryl. Anybody else have a question?
David, I do.
Yeah, sure. Paul?
I have a number of questions for Mr.
Okay.
Taylor.
Okay.
Mr. Taylor, as you may know, for several months I tried to actually get in contact with you, and I'm happy that now we do have contact with you. As you know, the villages are the closest to your property. There were shadow studies which we had trouble getting. You, as I saw, were on the leader of the team on the interim under the interim agreement, and we never could get to someone of the 12 people on the interim agreement who were mentioned as part of your team. And we were offered David Baker, who's a nice guy, but it wasn't a decision maker. I wanted to make sure that will you commit that in the future that the villages, as the most affected part of this area, will have direct access to decision makers at Virginia Tech? I frankly think we were treated improperly by Virginia Tech.
Mr. Rothstein, thank you very much for the opportunity to have some dialogue with you this evening and for your question. We at Virginia Tech do have people in specific roles to interface directly with the community. That's part of what David Baker's responsibilities are. And we do have processes by which to ensure that he's afforded the best available information to help engage with the community. Thank you.
All right, well, once again, I'll note you were a decision maker among the 12 identified in the interim agreement, and he was not. So, we do have some other questions. The test bed, how does the test bed relate to Commons Avenue? We knew how to get from A to B, A being where we are and B being Commons Avenue when we had two developers. Now, I'm not entirely sure how we get from A, where we are, to B, Commons Avenue, and I don't know how that test bed works. It's one thing to be supportive of a project, it's another thing to actually fund the project.
Again, thank you very much for your question. I would like to point out that the budget has not yet been signed by the governor. And so it's premature to say much further about the project, other than to emphasize that Virginia Tech is very excited about the potential for this project. And once it's fully authorized, VDOT and the researchers from VTTI, along with our partner, the City of Falls Church, will definitely engage with the community about all of the potential and the capabilities that will be associated with the project.
Okay, so you're not going to answer that question. I mean, the question is, to what extent can we be assured that there's going to be a Commons Avenue? And if the answer is that you can't assure us that Virginia Tech is going to give sufficient funds in order to make sure that there is a Commons Avenue, or that it's none of your concern, that's fine, that's an answer. So I would just like to have the answer as to what extent can we know that Virginia Tech will be helping to assure, along with EYA and whoever else, that there is a Commons Avenue.
So thank you, Mr. Rothstein. I appreciate your question and your clarification. And I will go back to my statement earlier, in which I specifically said that Virginia Tech will be allowing access for the development of Commons Avenue connecting the properties. So we're very much behind the effort to do so, to ensure that there is a mechanism by which to connect the properties in the form of the road. Now, again, we're not really in a position to get much in front of the governor with regard to the specifics on the test bed, but we're very much committed to the road. And when the test bed legislation is approved and we have the opportunity to engage our researchers along with VDOT, we'll definitely engage further with the city and with the community.
Okay, and I just have one or two more, but and I hope you take my indulgence because we're so close to you. The proposed text, updated text from Fairfax County included references to buffering between the village and your site. And I have to say, I went up to the director of the Board of Visitors, asked about buffering. There's a reference to a linear park. WO&D Trail is a linear park, so it doesn't really do much. What are you willing to say to the villages about giving buffering so that we're not facing the back of the building?
Well, Mr. Rothstein, again, thank you for the opportunity to answer this question as well. As I mentioned earlier in my statement, we are excited not only about the opportunity for this road, we will also be engaging the balance of our campuses across the Northern Virginia area and assessing what our long-term curricular and academic requirements are going to be, and that will help very much formulate the plan that we have moving forward when it's developed for redevelopment of the Falls Church campus. As I said earlier, we're very proud of our history there, and we are very interested and committed to staying in Falls Church in Fairfax County and keeping our campus and ensuring that it's a vibrant part of the greater community.
I'm sorry, what does your curriculum have to do with buffering next to your next door neighbor? I mean, you're giving me.
What I'm trying to suggest is that having a plan for what will be accomplished within the campus will help dictate what the needs of the campus infrastructure will look like.
So it's acceptable to you, perhaps, to just be fronting right up next to my community?
Mr. Rothstein, I'm sorry, I'm not in a position to really engage my personal opinion on that type of thing.
Okay, well, all right, I'll just finish this. I'll just finish this, David, and just note that Virginia Tech was not a very good neighbor to us. We asked specific questions. We never got the answers. I'm not seeing very much in the way of answers from Mr. Taylor, other than repeating certain talking points. And I certainly hope in the future that Mr. Taylor, who was the project lead under the interim agreement, will take back to his other executives the fact that it's important for Virginia Tech to consider its immediate neighbors as a part of the community that he says he's so proud to be part of. So thank you very much. I don't have anything else to say right now.
Thank you both. I don't see anybody else with a hand yet. So I want to interject a couple of things. First of all, on the idea of buffers, Brian, is it not correct? I forget, didn't we just put in some additional language about buffers?
We did, and I can go over
Or we're
that
going
in
to
more
vote on it
detail.
tonight, or,
later
okay.
tonight, yeah.
Okay, and we'll get to that, but I guess my point is, unless I'm being naive about it, Paul, that if the buffers are part of the plan, regardless of what Virginia Tech officials would or would not like to do, they're going to be bound by that.
Right. There's a reference to a linear park, and the WO&D is a linear park. So
Yeah.
that's really not much of a buffer if it's like the WO&D trail.
So basically, you're kind of saying the buffer that we're making a provision for in here is not really adequate to you.
There's
I'm trying to put you on the
there's just
spot, but
well, it's nice language. It's superficially nice language, but there's nothing in there saying, and the buffer will be X. Will be at least X. I'm sure you could redo, when you look, I didn't even know what a linear park was, and I looked at it and I realized, oh, the W&OD trail is a linear park. So it could be something like that, which is a few feet wide. So it sounds nice, but there are no teeth in it.
okay.
Let's move on, please.
Okay.
I'm
Actually,
sorry, Darren,
Okay,
the chairman controls this, not you.
yes, I will, Darren. Once we're sure that we've
Chairman,
got
my
more
friend.
questions.
So let's move on, please.
Okay, well, I have a question of my own very briefly, and that is, and it's not that important, I suppose. Mr. Taylor, I know you don't want to go into details about this this test bed. I'm just trying to understand, does it actually have anything to do with this with this through road at all, or are they completely different issues?
No,
Because I
sir.
understand you're committing to the through road.
Right. The test bed, again, the details have not yet been developed on that. But
Okay.
and I'll share with you what I believe to be the case. The expectation would be that the test bed would be embedded into the actual road itself with sensors and things of that nature. But again, I don't know the details on that. So
Okay, no,
I
that's
anticipate
good
that it
enough.
would
At
be,
least, well, at
will be
least
infrastructure with
understand
it.
there's a relationship somehow here. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Because to me, it just sounded like this very abstract thing. I couldn't see what it applied to.
Right.
Okay.
My understanding is it will overlay the road itself.
Mhm. Okay. Do we have anybody else who has a question for Mr. Taylor? Thank you very much for addressing us and answering the questions. Appreciate it.
We did have
Oh, do we? I'm
a
sorry.
question that came in from a member of the public asking for.
okay.
I think that some of the audience members are perhaps at a loss as to what the test bed is. We're
Okay,
referring to.
sure.
So,
I'll be glad.
But,
I see no reason not to entertain that now. Did you get one, on the chat or?
yeah,
Brian?
by chat.
You want to just read it and we'll deal with it?
Well, I was just going to ask Mr. Taylor if you could briefly explain what David was referring to in the budget item from the recent legislative session. Just provide a little background for folks in attendance.
What the legislation includes is language that affords a $10 million investment into the establishment of a smart city, smart road type of infrastructure that will be essentially embedded into this portion of the development as part of a greater initiative. I'd be candid with you. I don't have a lot more detail beyond that. And again, until the legislation is passed and the opportunity presents itself for the development of those details, it would be out of place for me to try to opine on it.
Thank you. All right, David, back to you. I think you're muted.
Right, sorry. Do we have anything else? I did not see any more hands from attendees, and I don't see any more from the task force. Can we move on? I think we can.
I think we can. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Taylor. So next we have a presentation, I think, by transportation people on the transportation impact analysis.
That's right, Bob. I just made you presenter, so the floor is yours. Handing over to Bob Pecora, Transportation Planner with the Fairfax County Department of Transportation.
Thank you, Brian, and members of the task force. Thanks for having me back to discuss transportation analysis. I have a few slides here. I'm going to begin sharing my slide deck. Hopefully this will work. And we move some stuff off there. Okay. All right, so we're at that point where the transportation analysis is nearing its conclusion. And I'm going to just talk about some slides here. Oh, wait a minute. I moved that. All right, so what I have is, like I said, a few slides going to talk about the key takeaways for this task force and what's going to go forward with the resubmittal that the Grove Slate is preparing to turn into VDOT. You've seen some of the comments that were sent to you last week by Brian. It was a response to questions that I had that David had sent us, and we responded to questions there. So I'll speak to a little bit about some of those, but also have some other points here that I can share with you all. And then we'll have like a quick discussion and such. So, so one of the key takeaways for the transportation impact analysis and the acceptance by VDOT, or the review and approval by VDOT, or actually it's by acceptance, is that the county can amend our plan amendments without VDOT approval or acceptance of the TIA for this project. That's because VDOT doesn't provide recommendations on county plan recommendations or plan amendments. They are able to respond to the traffic impacts to the road network. And so that's what they're going to be responding to, is just how it responds to, with mitigations to the proposed mitigations that are in the traffic study. And if they're willing to accept that those are mitigations that will help traffic flow. So with this task force, when it comes time to take a look at the plan text, and you've been doing that, we've been doing that past couple of meetings, and then with tonight's meeting, and also with for the next meeting after this, that when you're ready to take a vote on it, you still don't, you may not have the results of the traffic impact analysis, but it doesn't mean that does not preclude you from voting on or taking action on the plan amendment. So as I mentioned, the Grove Slate is preparing the traffic impact analysis for resubmittal to VDOT. And what they're proposing is a little bit different than what they submitted in the September TIA, which had a number of actually a higher density of residential and non-residential development. This submittal is going to be less, it's going to be refined. So we're anticipating with less development, it'll be less traffic impact on the roadways. The technical comments that we've been providing to VDOT and, sorry, not to VDOT, that we've been providing to Grove Slate and Evan's team is helping to refine the technical analysis. So there were comments provided to the development team at Grove Slate in October. I've also sent along, in December, there was a long email that I sent that had a little bit more comments from FCDOT. And I also have a slide following this one that talks about the last remaining comments that both VDOT and the county have put together for the development team. So Grove Slate and the development team have all the comments. They're responding to the comments, and they will respond when they submit the TIA to VDOT. And part of that process is having a comment resolution. So I've asked them to prepare all the comments and make sure that they're in with the submittal that goes to VDOT. So the other thing is that the proposed mitigations that we saw in September, or they were submitted in September, and we presented to the task force in November and December, they don't change. They're still going to be part of that because we see that as being recognized that this will help mitigate the roads and the intersections from the proposed development. We're also seeing that in, as number 4 here, is that there are two additional mitigations that were not part of the original TIA study, but are being added to it because that's something that we determined as a need. So the Grove Street left turn lane, where it had a high level of service or had projected difficulties for vehicles turning out of the residential street to turn onto Haycock Road, that a left turn may be warranted there to help with traffic flow so it doesn't back up into the neighborhood. We're also looking at Route 7 in Idlewood, that signal timings that will have to be changed as part of this process, because that was something that, the community had asked for a analysis of that intersection, but we also found out that, yes, traffic mitigations through signal timings do have to occur at that signal as well. And just also let you know that with this TIA, this submittal, this process, the comp plan, it's not the last time you'll see a traffic study for the area, because when they resubmit or when they submit zoning plans or rezoning plans, applications, that another traffic study will have to be submitted so that that is reviewed particular to that development, and they'll have, with the rezoning, there'll be more definite mitigations that have to occur with that. So the comp plan informs what we're doing with the plan area, and the traffic impact analysis looks at the road network as a whole, where we also see that there's other things that we need to do to ensure better connectivity, pedestrian and bicycle connectivity. But we also need to take care of the transit station itself. We have to maintain its function. And we also have to look at, how do we mitigate all the traffic that's going to be generated from this site, and also with the city of Falls Church. So on the remaining technical comments that we have here, and these are the comments that we've already submitted to Grove Slade and to EYA Hoffman, is that there's only 5. So, and they also bridge the gap with the city of Falls Church. So some of these actually respond to the city of Falls Church. They need to do that with their project. So the dual left turns at Route 7 and Haycock Road, that's the main intersection. We've talked about this before, and those actually have to remain. We did meet with VDOT and the city of Falls Church and Fairfax County, and all 3 entities agreed that the dual left turns at Haycock, eastbound Route 7 onto Haycock have to remain. The development team know that, and they've included that in their mitigations, in their traffic analysis. Also in our transportation plan, the countywide transportation plan, Route 7 is planned, or plan recommendation for 6 travel lanes. We don't want the task of this project development team to preclude that 6 lanes of travel may eventually be on Route 7. Here's a change from what was proposed in September. The dual left turns at Falls Church Drive and Haycock, well, they're not needed. That's something that Grove Slade has provided to us, that said, well, based on the mitigation, or based on the development activity, that the dual lefts that they at one time proposed actually are not needed. So I'm just making sure that they stick to that and say that you do not need to have those dual left turns there. Something that we talked about for across the project, or across all 3 projects, is the City Falls Church, Virginia Tech, or this is prior to the HIT consulting pulling out, but it can still apply to the whatever happens with the Virginia Tech property, is that on-site traffic circulation parking management for all 3 sites should be maintained or managed in some way. So we're looking at that, a response to a comment, and have them include a plan or strategy in the traffic impact analysis that addresses that. So that's the development team working with the city of Falls Church to work this out. And this actually may present itself more at a rezoning stage a little bit later, but we wanted something included in the TIA with this resubmittal. And we also want them to look at cohesive pedestrian routes between all three sites. So that's, pedestrian routes, but also talk about bicycle routes as well. So that all three projects are linked together in that respect. It's not just individual projects and then City of Falls Church. So, and the last one, Route 7 at Chestnut Street. This is the new intersection that's being proposed that goes into, it's a left turn into Commons Lane. Well, with the modifications at that intersection, it actually changes the median that's on Route 7, so the median guardrails. And there's a digital message board for the toll road sign. That has to change. It's going to be moved. So we're asking that it be relocated to the city side of Route 7. That's on the westbound side or the northwest direction, but it's heading towards Route 66 or I-66. That the message sign be located on the city side so it's easy for drivers to view whatever the current rates are for the toll road. So those are the remaining comments. Those are part of what they need to submit back to us as far as comment resolution. And then the last slide, this is talking about what we're going to be doing transportation planning going forward. So with this project, with this comp plan amendment, one of the key things was that the active West Falls Church plan, which is what we heard from the community about the need for pedestrian and bike plan outside this area, or linking or providing connectivity to the West Falls Church planning area. We saw that as a need that, well, it's going to go beyond this this comp plan amendment. So we're going to follow up with a, it's called a follow-on motion that has us as the transportation or the county working with the community afterwards, after this this project or this plan amendment is heard by the board, that we can come back to the community and start planning on strategies and recommendations for bicycle and pedestrian connectivity that leads to and from this transit station area. And that goes beyond just the immediate area, but we're also looking towards east of I-66, south towards the City of Falls Church, and also to the west in the Providence area. So we're looking at a cohesive strategy for planning for bike and pedestrian connectivity. That is something that Tim Cooks presented to the task force back in December. And so we will continue working on that as part of the follow-on motion that comes with this action for the plan amendment. Again, that's what I was saying with pedestrian bike connectivity, but we're also looking at maintaining a transit station that works, and also looking at traffic mitigation, that whatever is being proposed with this TIA and this development, that traffic mitigation is implemented. We will continue to work with the community group and community groups and citizens and have meetings after this meeting or after this process. And we will still, as FCDOT, we still continue to coordinate with multiple agencies, project teams, planners, traffic engineers, a whole list of other people. So we are still involved with this project, and we'll continue after the plan amendment as well. That's all I have. Leave it up to questions. If you have any questions, please go ahead.
Yes, please. Anybody first? Anybody on the task force?
David, I have some questions.
Okay, sure. Let me just make sure. Give me a second, Paul. I'm just trying to make sure, since you've spoken, that nobody else has raised their hands, but I don't see anybody else from the task force who has done so far. So go ahead. I'll go with you.
Okay. First of all, just as I mentioned in an earlier email, just for the sake of people who are watching this, there are a number of materials I've uploaded to Google Drive, and if they go to tinyurl.com/Fairfax information, they can see them. One of the questions I have relates to a document, Bob, that you sent out on December 23rd.
That's correct.
Yeah, people can find that. I just want people to be able to find it. If they go into that Google Drive, and they'll see, they will see, pardon me, Werman Botea 443 with attachments. And one of those attachments is December Pecora email. So, you know, I have to say you sent it to 21 people, but you did not send it to anyone on the task force. And as far as I can tell, you didn't send it to anyone in the community. That disappoints me. How in the future are we going to make sure that when public servants, such as yourself, are sending out issues that relate to traffic on Haycock and traffic on Route 7, that those of us in the community who are most affected by Route 7 and Haycock get to see those? It's particularly bad because it happened while the task force was in place. But I certainly am interested in seeing it in the future, particularly because we have a transportation planner in our complex. And I do consider this to have been a failure by Fairfax County. And I don't understand why it happened. And I'd like to know how it won't happen again in the future.
Okay, so yeah, I apologize for not sending out to the task force. That email was a technical email, or technical comments related directly to the applicants, the development team. So they have that as part of the refinement of their traffic impact analysis. The list of comments that I provided there were to help them to refine what they're planning to do with the traffic analysis and to get it ready to resubmit to VDOT. We don't have comments back from them yet. That's part of this process that we're doing. So yeah, also I apologize for not sending out to the task force or not mentioning it at like the January task force meeting, but lesson learned, I will take this going forward, that I will provide comments to the task force. And if there's a need for explanation, I can explain those as well.
Well, after the task force disbands, which will happen probably after the next meeting, I would like to continue to receive those comments. What you have with Gaurav Slade, what you get with the developers, what you get with VDOT. I had a meeting with VDOT, and they were very clear that they hadn't approved this yet, and they were very encouraging of me to file a FOIA request. And I think it's kind of disgraceful that a state agency would encourage someone to file a Freedom of Information request for information that you should be providing to us.
And I'm going to jump in real quick. This is Greg Steverson, Deputy Director of FCDOT. I'm not sure what information are you referring to that wasn't provided?
The December 23rd email that Bob sent out to 21 people, including the developers, but did not include the task force on. And you can take a look. You can. I mean, Brian, can you put that email? Can you put that email up, Brian?
I am.
Yeah, this is Mike Garcia. There's no need to put it up. I think the email that you're referencing, and I'm also with FCDOT, is part of staff continuing to do comments and have communication with the team, the development team who is preparing a TIA. So it's all incumbent upon us to be able to communicate with them and have the ability to do so. I'm not sure if you're expecting every single email that we send to them in the course of doing business to be able to go to you. I think that would be highly unlikely we could accommodate that request. If there are particular ones you're looking for, then we can make those available, but you need to be more clear about what you're looking for, please.
You found it able to email to 21 people. So I'd like you to email it to 22, and I can distribute it as necessary. And let me remind you, you're a government organization. You're subject to the Freedom of Information Act.
Thank you.
And we are interested, we are interested in our area. We're the ones who are most affected by the traffic on and Route 7.
Okay, so you have the comments, I understand, because it's on that mini or tiny URL. So I went to the website and saw that you have those comments. Do you have any particular questions about those questions or those comments I submitted?
I'd like, I'm not a traffic expert. We have one in our complex. I'd like to know what the outstanding results are. I saw, for example, there was a document that came from September from VDOT, and there was just sort of this final disposition there. So if we can get the communications as we are entitled to as constituents, I'd just like to get them, and I can consult with the people with a person in my community. And if you could tell me what outstanding items there are from those September and January communications, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, so the only outstanding items are on this this slide right here. I'm still sharing this, right, Brian? Yeah, so these 5 comments, this is what's the outstanding comments. What was submitted by VDOT in October, which is, I think, 6 comments. And also the December email that I sent was 7 comments or 7 different items. That's something that the Grove Slate and EYA still have to respond to. So when they submit their TIA, they are going to be responding to all the comments that we forwarded out to them with a comment resolution. So when that is available to us, you know, we can share that with the task force and say these are these are the comment resolutions that they are providing with their traffic impact analysis.
Okay,
The TIA is not accepted or adopted or reviewed again since September, or since the September submittal. So the VDOT does not have anything new to review, and that's what we're trying to get the applicant team to resubmit their TIA with any refinements or the comments that we submitted.
Okay, thank you, Bob. And just to let it, the last thing, once the task force is gone, other members of the task force can speak for themselves. Will you continue to send me those documents as someone in the community who's very affected by these results, more so than just about anyone who is on that email?
Yeah, I can send the relevant ones that speak to whatever's happening with the traffic analysis and where the disposition is of that. At some point, it's going to end when the traffic impact analysis is concluded. So
right, thank you.
Those will end.
We consider relevant anything that affects Haycock and Route 7 and Great Falls. Thanks very much.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Paul, for your questions. Do we have any other questions? I don't see any from the task force. I don't know, Brian, do you think it makes sense to take questions on this specific thing from the public? I know that's not how we were going to set it up, but maybe it makes sense to address each one of these things that we're dealing with tonight, in toto and everything, rather than come back to it later. Do you see a problem with that?
David, I was actually thinking that after I have a short presentation. After I give that, we can do as we've done before. We have 2 public comments / question periods. We have a short,
Okay.
maybe a 5 to 10 minute one
Fine.
after I present, and then we have the longer one after the task force has a chance to discuss and ask
That sounds
questions. Does
fine.
that work?
So why don't you go ahead with whatever you were going to present?
Perfect. Just make myself presenter. Give me 1 moment so I can pull my screen up. Are you all able to see my screen?
I can see it.
Okay, perfect. So since the last task force meeting, we've been updating the comprehensive plan in response to recommendations that we've received both from the task force and the community. And we've also identified some additional improvements separate from those recommendations. So I'm going to briefly cover all of those. First, and I won't go into too much detail on this, but the task force has already reviewed and approved the West Falls Church Active Transportation Plan language. It's been included under the TSA-wide transportation recommendation, and as Bob mentioned earlier, FCDOT and the county is planning on engaging with the wider community as it develops this plan moving forward. So, as we can see here, that was added to page 3, lines 34 through 45, and later on I can bring up the document itself if we want to review it in its totality. And then in addition to the active transportation plan text, there were a number of other transportation changes. We updated the map, the transportation planning map, as was recommended by the task force, to include the realigned Chestnut Street, as you can see here down at the bottom, a note regarding this realignment, and the connection between the eastbound I-66 off-ramp and the Metro Rail Station road off of Route 7. We have also strengthened the language regarding the implementation of a parallel street to Haycock Road. I believe I included a note about that in my email to the task force last week. And then in response to task force input, we also included guidance that an adequate amount of structured parking should be maintained to serve the park and ride Metro Rail users. I appreciated the input that we received from Stephanie and the Lemon Road Civic Association on that item. In addition to that, in addition to the text that speaks specifically to the West Falls Church Active Transportation Plan, as we discussed previously with the task force, we're strongly recommending off-site transportation improvements that accommodate safe access to the Metro Rail station. And again, that was in response to a lot of the great input we received from members of the task force, from folks in communities represented by the task force, and from as you referred to, David, earlier, the I-66 crew, east of I-66 crew. We had a great meeting with them, and they gave us a lot of input on that subject as well. So we're really trying to be responsive to those recommendations, and I think the plan's better for it. And an additional one is the bottom one here, that we included guidance to construct visual cues that indicate transitions from commercial to residential areas. Additionally, we added some recommendation that a direct pedestrian access to the Metro Rail station be maintained from Land Unit A3 to Land Unit A1. And this is in response, essentially between the village and the pavilion and the Metro Rail station. And again, this is in response to the feedback we got from Pavilion, from Linda and Holly's community. I think that's a vital connection that we definitely want to highlight and make sure remains. And then moving on from the transportation items. So previously, this is not something that the task force had addressed before, because it applies to the entire TDA. So we are proposing an update to it because in the last draft, the affordable housing recommendation remained unchanged, but in late February, after the last task force meeting, the Board of Supervisors updated the county's workforce housing policy. So essentially, it lowered the total commitment level, or the percentage of rental units that are expected to be affordable, by 1/3. But in turn, there are now more rental units that are expected to be committed to households that have a lower income as compared to before. So the units are more affordable to the folks that need them most, but there are fewer of them. And this change was only made to adjust the West Falls Church standards to be in line with the same kind of adjustments that we saw with the newly adopted workforce housing policy. And related to that was the plan language stating that the land use recommendations were inclusive or exclusive of affordable or bonus units. That was mistakenly included in the draft that I circulated last week, and that was a result of miscommunication. So we're correcting that in the text, so it will be reverted back to it was in the December draft, that the land use recommendations for subunit A1 and A2 are inclusive of any of the affordable and bonus units. And then the latest draft also includes 2 changes related to parks and open space and landscape buffers. So the first of which you can see on the left side applies to the entire TDA. And this was in response to your recommendation, Paul, that states that landscape buffers should be provided in accordance with objectives 8 and 14 of the land use element of the policy plan. And then the second is specific to subunit A2, the Virginia Tech property. And again, this is in response to the concerns we heard from Paul, from Chris, and from folks in their community when we met with them. And that states that an open space amenity with significant landscape buffering, such as a linear park, should be provided on the south side of the Falls Church Drive, the transition between subunits A2 and A3. And that's a good segue to the building height map. As we discussed previously, the maximum building height of the Virginia Tech property adjacent to the village was reduced to 105 feet. So the new map on the right, you can see that circled in yellow. And then additionally, in response to the recommendations that we received from Stephanie and others in the Lemon Road Civic Association, the portion of the WMATA property along I-66 that's currently forested is now recommended for a maximum building height of 0 feet. And then related to that is a change on page 14, lines 23 through 25 of the draft. Or sorry, this is actually related to the portion adjacent to the village. And this was a change the task force voted on, I believe, at the last meeting. Portions, so on page 14, lines 23 and 25 of the draft now state that portions of the buildings that are directly across from the villages should be no more than 105 feet high. Mechanisms such as shadow studies, cross sections, and building design should be provided to demonstrate that the proposed height does not adversely impact residences in that development. And then finally, we made a few changes to the environmental recommendation for subunits A1 and A2. So for one, we changed total volume to peak runoff to better reflect our intent. And we added some phasing language. So we made clear that the stormwater management infrastructure is expected to be implemented alongside the development that it's intended to serve. And then at the request, again, of the Lemon Road Civic Association, but also from others. We heard this from the Mount Daniel Nelson Heights neighborhood, from some of the folks living east of I-66, that nighttime light pollution was a major concern. And so we wanted to make sure that the plan addressed that lines for the mitigation of nighttime light. And then finally, we added a recommendation that development incorporate natural landscaping on each site, which helps to provide ecological services and can help to improve stormwater management. And that is, I think, a pretty complete summary of most of the changes that we made that weren't, we found a couple of, minor edits to make here and there that were editorial in nature or stylistic. But I believe that covers all the substantive changes. So with that, I can open it up to the community for a few minutes. We'll do a short Q&A or comment session for folks who are unable to stay until the end. I would ask that if you are able to stay the entire time, to please hold your questions until after the task force has a chance to ask their questions and discuss. So we can allow sufficient time for the folks who are unable to stay for the entire time. So if you would like to raise your hand to ask a question, you can do so by opening up the participants panel. On the bottom right hand of your screen, it's a silhouette of a person with 3 bars. And then at the bottom of that window, you should see a small square button with a hand on it. If you click that, you can raise your hand. Please, once you do raise your hand and ask your question, click it once more to lower it so that we know that you've already asked your question. And Sonia, I see you have your hand raised. I can unmute you and you can go ahead and ask your question or make your comment.
Yeah, sure. Really quick, I guess 2 things just in reviewing the language that you were just
This is Sonia Brehe, right?
It is Sonia Brehe.
Okay, I thought
Yes.
so. I think I just want to make sure everybody could tell who was speaking. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, sure thing.
No,
Sonia
that's
Brehe.
okay.
I should actually introduce myself because I'm the Northern Virginia Advocacy Manager for the Coalition for Smarter Growth. I've been kind of keeping an eye on all this and really appreciate everybody's work. In reviewing the language, I just wanted to mention that I'm really glad to hear about the West Falls Church active sort of transportation plan that's being incorporated into this, because I think a lot of what we've heard from the neighboring communities about the pedestrian access and concerns about, increased traffic and how are people going to walk and bike to the new development and wanting to make that safe. And I think that's going to be a really great asset to this, connecting the new development into the communities that are already established in the surrounding area. One question that I had was regarding the stormwater language. I was wondering if this language that's being proposed is consistent with the recent Merrifield comp plan amendment that was passed, I think about a year or so ago. I know that task force talked a lot about trying to provide some very progressive stormwater containment, even trying to do better than the Tyson's plan. And I just wonder is if, as we do these various plan amendments, if the stormwater language is consistent, because I think they referred a lot about 1-inch containment and language like that. So I was just curious if this is different language or if this is consistent with other county plans. That's it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for your question, Sonia. This is, we did contemplate the 1-inch requirement here, but determined that it wasn't feasible in this case because of the type of that tends to make sense in parts of the county with a higher intensity, like places like Tyson's. This language is consistent, is generally consistent with some other ongoing planning exercises that are being undertaken in the county, in particular with the McLean CBC Comprehensive Plan Amendment. I think one of the advantages that we've had with this plan amendment is that we're looking at an area that has a lot of impervious surface today, and we're able to improve that with this recent this update.
Yeah, agreed. I think anything is going to be much better than that parking lot. So thank you. I appreciate you taking my question.
Thank you, Sonia. Do we have anybody else here? I'm not seeing that yet. All right. Should I?
If so, we can move on to if the task force members have any questions, and we can take some. If folks have questions at the end, we can take those as well.
Okay. So, do any task force members have questions of? I would say either Brian's well, I guess it's most. We already had a chance to speak on Bob's, I guess. So it's mostly a question of Brian's presentation here. Does anybody have any questions of it? I'd like to get some clarification that. Oh, yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I do. I was trying to unmute.
Sure, Stephanie. That's okay. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was intrigued by Mr. Taylor's statement that after an intensive business analysis, they didn't go forward. I'm wondering if there is an intensive business analysis that justifies 120-foot heights on the WMATA parcel that is nearest to our neighborhood. We've avoided a discussion of density. We've spent our task force meetings discussing other topics, or we've discussed density on other parcels, particularly the Virginia Tech parcel that's closest to the villages and the pavilion. And after we got the draft plan, I think that was in December, LRCA updated our membership on everything that was in there and we asked for feedback, and we got some feedback from neighbors who live in the area of LRCA that is closest to the rail yard and has clear views of everything in that direction. The rail yard, the power lines, the power station, the cover box, the parking garage, the new school. And we wonder what it's going to look like. What are 120-foot buildings going to look like? People are distressed about that. And I feel that we haven't really aired it in the task force meetings. I haven't heard why 120 feet is needed? Is there, because when this first, when it was first admitted into the plan to be studied, it was to raise it from 60 or 65 feet to 85 feet, and then it jumped up to 120. And we need to know why we have to look at 120-foot buildings pushed to the edge of the TSA, where we look at them. And I feel like that I don't want to raise this at the last meeting. I'm raising it at the penultimate meeting because we haven't had a chance to air it before. Is there an intensive business analysis that justifies a 120-foot building? Or could it be 85? Could it be 100? That's what I would like to discuss. And if not tonight, I would like to see simulations of what those buildings would look like from McKay Street, from Norwalk Street, from Eastman Drive, from Montview Court. The photos that we have are from October 2019, and they are of townhouses and I don't know what height the building is. But that's what our community needs to see before I can feel like I can vote or reach a consensus with my fellow task force members. It needs to be discussed.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie. So the question is, who can best answer that? Somebody from WMATA, I guess, who's here? Can somebody address this? Or Brian, do you have an answer for this just based on how we looked at density here?
Yeah, I can say generally, as we discussed, I think this may have been back in 2020 or 2019, we went over the transit-oriented development policy. So we generally expect that generally planned for the most intense, highest buildings, the densest development, to be nearest to the metro rail station, so that most of the people in this transit station areas that are using the metro rail station as a means to go to and from the place of work or where they live, that they have shorter walks, that it's easier for them to walk to the transit and take that as a mode of transportation. And so that idea was embodied in the height map in this draft plan amendment. And then an additional consideration for that is, of course, open space and parks. From very nearly the beginning of this task force, we heard from a lot of folks that there is a limited amount of park space available for your use south of I-66. And so we took that to mean that that should be one of our objectives in this planning effort, was to ensure that there's an adequate amount of park space for folks in the community and for folks who live nearby, to enjoy, to go and recreate. With that park space and with the development potential that we're talking about here, the more space that there is the more open space there is, that development has to go somewhere, and so it means that the adjacent buildings then go higher, and so that was certainly one component of it, but I can tell you that was generally our rationale for how the height on WMATA was developed. But I don't know if there's anybody from the developer from WMATA who would like to address. I would say the photo simulations that the task force looked at back in, he said, Stephanie, I believe it was October 2019. Those were of a 120-foot tall building. And I'm happy to bring those up.
No, I don't think that's correct, Brian.
Right,
Brian, that was an 85-foot building. How many stories are in it? If there were 7 stories, is that 120 feet?
No. Yeah, I'm happy to answer since we created those drawings, if that's helpful. So
go ahead, Evan, please.
Thank you for allowing us to address the committee. And Stephanie, thank you for the question. We'd also be happy to meet with your community between now and the next meeting if that'd be helpful as well. Very open to that. So the images that we created, those were 100. The tallest building that was in that skyline that we created was 120 foot tall, relative to I think it was a 68 foot tall garage. And the rationale, you asked a great question. What's kind of the financial rationale for why you would need 120 feet tall on those two parcels, the ones that are blocking the garage and closest to 66? So there's a few reasons on this site. There's the constructability perspective, and then there's the actual items that Brian really hit pretty eloquently. On the construction side, there are different types of construction. So the first buildings to be delivered on the site in phase 1 and phase 2 will be wood frame construction buildings, which are going to be 5 stories of residential above a retail base or residential base. So about 6 stories, about 85 feet tall. Those will be the first 2 buildings delivered. And then we have, of course, townhomes buffering up against the villages and the pavilions. So that's when you go from wood to concrete construction, which is the next stage. The breaks that make sense economically to build in concrete are typically at about 120 feet tall. When you get to about 12 stories, you get to an efficient construction type for concrete. Most people won't make the leap above a 6-story building to an 8-story building, for example, because the cost to build that first 6 stories in concrete versus wood makes it completely unfeasible. There are some buildings, and if you're in a downtown market or a market that's extremely high-end rents, where you can afford to do lower buildings out of concrete, but that's not very typical in the suburban market. In particular, in this site, and the reason why we asked for 120 feet there is if you think of the WMATA site, between the bus infrastructure that we're creating, the kiss and ride zone we're creating, retention of the existing above grade parking structure with 1,200 spaces, the grid of streets that we're creating, all the open spaces and parks, it leaves small building pads, and the building pads on that side up against Route 66 get pretty small. And what that means is that the floor plate, meaning the amount of square footage I can fit on a floor of a building, and that parcel gets to be about 10,000 square feet of residential. And so if I were only to be building an 8-story building, an 85-foot tall building, I'm only building an 80,000 square foot residential apartment building, which is just not economically feasible. So in most apartments, you're looking for somewhere between 175 to 250 units, or a building that's about 150 to 250,000 square feet to make it so you can operate it efficiently and actually not lose money building it. Very small boutique buildings just are very difficult to make work unless you're in a downtown market. So because the parcel has gotten smaller and smaller and smaller in order to fit all of the stuff that we've kind of agreed to do, the only way to make that a building that could ever work would be to make it a little bit taller. And our thought on that side, and we appreciate the letter that somebody forwarded to us yesterday. Our thought was, because of the distance from that site to your community, the fact that it's beyond the rail yards, it's beyond the highway, it's almost, I think it's a mile away from your neighborhood. Excuse me, and the agreement that we have to do dark skies and to think about good design and work with your community on that there's ways to make that a pleasant facade to look at, even if it is a 12-story building. And of course, it will be shielding what today is an open, kind of unattractive concrete garage with light pouring out of it. So there are some benefits to it, but of course, there's no way I'm going to satisfy everyone. There are going to be people that won't want to see a building there, but we'd love to work with your community in the next 2 weeks to see if we can get people a little bit more comfortable with it.
Stephanie, what is your response to that? Is that adequate, or you still have questions? I think no, here you are. Okay.
I guess maybe I need to hear it again. I mean, it's tough to take all that in, and I still want to hear the economic justification. I want to know what else is that really what we have to do?
Would it be helpful to, we are happy to come meet for an hour, 2 hours, whatever you want, with you and whoever in your community wants to meet with us and walk through this in the next week, if that's helpful. And I can get into more detail.
Evan, I think it would be helpful if maybe this is something that's been presented to us then, but we've seen so much stuff. I think it'd be helpful if the whole task force got some sort of visual, such as Stephanie's asking, where that shows what that's going to look like. Even
Yeah, so we
even
can share the
something-
imagery. We can share the images again with the task force that shows the heights of the buildings from different views. And Stephanie, if you don't mind emailing me the other streets you had mentioned, we can look at views from those streets as well.
I would love to email you that.
Okay, great.
Good. I have a couple of questions on this, though. If all of these economic and construction constraints that you described are so evident and were there from the beginning, why is it that when you filed the application, you asked for only 85 feet?
So quite
Why was
frankly,
that
we
not impractical right then?
So if you, just to refresh everyone's memory, when WMATA filed the original application, I think it's almost 3 years ago.
Over 3 years ago, actually.
Yeah,
It was
so-
3 years
so-
ago this month, we voted to put it on the test
Yeah,
list.
so they had not selected a development partner at that point. They just recognized that they wanted to see the site redevelop to make sure that the site could be maintained, to make sure that they had ridership at the site. And so they came out with a general request for redevelopment of the site. And then as they selected a partner, we started getting into design and working with all of you over the last 2 years on the actual design of the site. And so at one point, you may recall, we actually had townhomes in that area up against Route 66. And this was, a year and a half ago. Those got rejected because they were too close to the highway. And the way that there is a state or county law that really encourages more commercial-oriented development up against highways and residential further away. And so then we rejiggered the whole plan again and came up with a new design that we unveiled to all of you about a year ago. And that is when these two buildings were put in that location and they were taller. So it really was an iterative process that was part of the overall designing of the site to come up with a site plan that really works. It wasn't, I'm sure WMATA wasn't thinking of that 3 years ago when they first filed for it.
And none of this was influenced by the city's decision to build 150 feet?
Not at all. Has nothing to do with it.
Honestly.
Yeah, it literally has nothing to do with it. Completely different projects.
They've already set the
David?
precedent, so you could, you
No,
can
really,
justify
Chris,
it that way.
No, I appreciate the question. It has nothing to do with that at all. I mean, this design team, we've been working on this site. As you know, we presented probably 5 or 6 different schemes to this committee over the years. And we've been very respectful, especially on the WMATA site. I know you had issues with height up against your community on the Virginia Tech site. We've intentionally buffered your entire community with 45-foot townhomes, which is much lower than, you would typically see that close to a metro. And then we tented up towards the metro. So, it really has nothing to do, it's completely divorced from anything related to the high school site. As you know, the high school site is much higher and then it dips down and comes back up as we get towards the metro, which is not a typical thing. You typically would see the highest heights at the metro and tenting down, but because it's a different jurisdiction and they had different goals for what they wanted to see there, it's just a unique situation.
David?
Yes, Paul.
Yeah, so I recall, and I asked this question of Neil Kumar, who I see is on the phone. I believe the Harris Teeter site in Falls Church is a Rushmark property. How tall, Neil, is that site?
Neil, you there? Let's see if you are there.
Neil, if you're there, you're muted.
He was there.
Yeah. All right. Well,
I don't think I see him there now.
Right.
I know he was, but I don't see him on the attendee list now.
Right.
Well, or was he on the I'm sorry.
He's on the participant list. I see him.
That's right. But yes, you are. Neil, do you hear us? Can you unmute yourself and address that? Okay.
Well, my point is that, this concept of concrete, et cetera, et cetera. You walk around the city of Falls Church, not at the periphery, it seems like there's a lot of development that is not 120 feet, 120 feet. So that's really an empirical question. And the Harris Teeter building, I believe, is one of them. Neil might be able to correct me. And so I'm just not particularly buying that. You know, it seems when in the city of Falls Church, when you go through the city itself, they somehow have this development that's not so high. When you go to the periphery of the city of Falls Church, they seem to be dumping all their high density tall buildings there. And if you know if you're familiar with the geography of it, they're not really Falls Church citizens, city of Falls Church people, other than that little complex right next to Falls Plaza. They're not adjacent to any of this. In fact, Falls Plaza really buffers the vast majority of the people in Falls Church from it. So, you know, this concept, oh, you need X number of feet, and somehow Virginia Tech, somehow WMATA had no idea, so we went higher. It seems to be belied by what you're actually seeing the development within the city of Falls Church, not adjacent, a city of Falls Church where there are actually people of Falls Church around.
Yeah, I mean, Paul, you're welcome to your opinion on this. In the city of Falls Church, most of the concrete buildings have been senior housing, which are required to be concrete. That's a different economic model. Most of the other buildings have been wood. I do believe the Harris Teeter building was concrete, and it's maybe 90 feet tall, but it was also built quite a while ago and was a unique situation where it's a long-term hold forever, and HIT Construction tends to be build in concrete no matter what they build, because they are the contractor and they build concrete. But I mean, all I can tell you is best practices in the industry. You know, you typically do wood frame, which is a 6-story building, 5 stories over a base. And then once you go from there into concrete, the economics of it, anything below about 10 to 12 stories, as I said, doesn't make a whole lot of sense unless you're in a CBD downtown where you can make the justification for that extra floor because the rents are so high. In this case in particular, it goes beyond just the concrete methods. As I said, it's a very small pad. It's a tiny little site. And so in order to get the amount of square footage you would need to make a building make sense, you have to go a little bit taller in that location. And the reason we felt it was justifiable was it's shielded. It's on the other side of the garage from any of your homes. So it's not particularly visible from any of where your residents live. It is a concern for Stephanie, and we're happy to work with her on that in that regard.
The actual height, one of the issues in this task force seems to be the difference between opinion and fact. The actual height of buildings in the city of Falls Church is not a matter of opinion. It's a matter of fact. So
I didn't say that they weren't, and I don't want to get into an argument with you over things like this. I feel like, you know, we're happy to work with Stephanie on this issue. We've already been talking about this issue for 20 minutes. I'm not going to convince you that I'm right. But, you know, David, if there's other questions for me, I'm happy to answer them.
Can you show us what could I just ask, can you just show us what the building height is in the city of Falls Church? Once again, you can't, it's not convincing me that I'm right. It's
the buildings we are proposing on the city of Falls Church site. The apartment building, which would be relevant to this one, is a wood frame building. It's a 5-story over a retail podium, as I said. The high-rise building is a senior housing building, which is required to be built in concrete. So that's a taller building. And the other high-rise building is a condominium, which you typically would build out of concrete because you're selling it for more money. In this case, because the site is going to be owned in fee by WMATA, it's an apartment building, not a condominium. So it's a different structure. And that's why, you know, you'd either go wood frame or you'd go taller. So yeah, I'm happy to share what the heights are on the high school side. I don't know that it's necessarily relevant because there's no apartment buildings being built there that are on such a small parcel.
Actually, I was asking within the city of Falls Church where there's residential, but I can let that go for now.
Okay, we can't stay on this the whole time. Is there anybody else who wants to speak on this? Sorry.
I do have a question. You know, there's a question I've asked about 7 times, and I can document that for people. And it's based on something that Stephanie said. In the calculation of the floor area ratio, how, at least this is how the question I still have, in the WMATA site, to what extent is that ravine, or whatever you want to call it, calculated in there? In the Virginia Tech site, to what extent is that road, will a road be calculated in it? So, you know, I'm not entirely, that's, Stephanie, I thought had very interestingly asked a question about the formula, and I never got an answer to that formula. And in trying to think about it, since I never got an answer, even though I asked about it 7 times, I wondered about what about this area that's non-productively used? And can we get this actual formula that takes into account things like roads that go through Virginia Tech, or the ravine that's sort of unusable there?
Yeah, Paul, I think we did actually answer that at the last task force meeting when the question was posed. And it's just a matter of the surface area of those parcels versus the proposed building area, the square footage of the buildings.
Well, except if you go back, you'll see Stephanie said, can you give me a formula? And you never quite gave the formula. And the question I have, at least as it relates to Virginia Tech, is how does that road upon which it's just a road, how does that affect the calculation of the floor area ratio? There has to be a formula somewhere.
Paul, this is Barbara Byron, if I might try to answer your question. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Please do.
Thank you. I can't answer about the City of Falls Church and how they calculate, but in Fairfax County, you take the entire land area, and that includes the roads, and your density is applied to the roads, and then you times it by the FAR that you're proposing. So on the WMATA site, it's 0.96, and on the other site, it's 2.5. That gives you the maximum development potential for the site. There are some cases in the county, and I don't believe it's applicable here, where you have very steep slopes where you do get a density penalty, but the vast majority of property in the county, it's the total land area before dedications to the roads.
So how does that runoff area, thank you, Barbara, how does that runoff area affect the calculation?
If it's within the bounds of the property, it is calculated as the base.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you for the answer. Do we have anybody else with a question? I'm not sure, Brian, where that leaves us now.
We can open it up for more see if there are any additional questions or comments from the members of the community and other folks that are in attendance. Then
yeah. Okay. And in fact, I sort of have a question for some of the attendees, which is, I know we had several emails that came in from some of you about how we needed to have another meeting. We weren't ready to deal with it, but some of them seem to be insisting that there be more in the amended comp plan about the traffic problems in your area than is in there now. Now, Brian has explained, this is already in the comp plan, that we have this language about this, I'm sorry, what did you call it again? Brian, it's a traffic.
The active West Falls Church
transportation plan. Okay.
Active transportation plan.
So what I'd like to do is, I mean, that's what's in there. That's all staff is proposing to do. So I'd like to know if that satisfies all of you, because I think that's what we're going to have, but I don't want to be debating this again at the next meeting. So if you have questions or comments on that, I'd kind of like to hear them now, so we can more put that to rest. So any of you, Judy or Cheryl Sim, or any of you, Cheryl, I see you've got your hand up, Cheryl Sim, so why don't you go ahead?
Okay, am I unmuted?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you, David, and thanks everybody, and John Faust, if you're still on, thank you for your message the other day. Yes, I appreciate that language very much, and I'm sure a number of my neighbors and people who live in the general area appreciate that new language. And I think we would probably all feel better if Ben Wiles can start picking out some dates, concrete dates, and sending us those dates. Because a lot of this often falls into the realm of aspirational, just like the bicycle and sidewalk plan strikes me as very aspirational. So if we can move from the aspirational to the concrete, I think that would go a long way. But while I have the floor, David, if you don't mind, I have a couple of questions for Bob Pecor about the TIA.
Sure, that's fine.
Yeah, so Bob, I am still kind of confused about the TIA, and I'm sure other people are as well. From what I understand, you have a second draft that will be prepared by Grove Slade, and you're going to use a lower density than what you used in the previous, the initial plan. I don't understand why you would use a lower density. And in fact, all of these different numbers that we've seen about the maximum number of residential units has conflated and confused many of us when we're looking at the TIA and looking at the comp plan. So number one, Bob, can you please clarify why you would be using a lesser density? Number one. Number two, when you said another plan will be done before it goes to the Planning Commission, who is going to do and pay for that plan? And I forgot my third point, but I'll leave it there.
Okay, well, thanks for the questions.
All right, Bob, I'd like to second Cheryl on that first question, because I was going to ask you the same thing. I mean, we've got a certain density that's built into the plan. I'm not quite sure I understand either how suddenly we're basing on a less density, and so therefore we've got less traffic. That's not the density we put into the plan.
Right, so with the plan amendment, it's a density that was part of the original nomination for the plan density. What the development team now is proposing is what they're looking to actually produce or actually build or plan or program. So the less density, and I'm gonna ask Evan to chime in on what they're planning to do, but they're looking at less residential. The retail, I believe, is less than what they proposed with the September TIA. So what this is doing is this is part of that refinement of the traffic analysis. So what they're going to be submitting within a week is that second TIA. It's not a new TIA. It's just a refined from what was submitted in September. So Evan can chime in on that one. Let me get to the second question. I think you are you referring to the active Fairfax plan? Cheryl, that would be after the plan amendment here?
Well,
is that the second study that you're looking at, or is it the one that might be submitted with the rezoning case?
I think it's the latter,
I was
Bob.
asking about the rezoning. When you go to rezoning, who would be running that TIA? Thanks.
So that traffic study also comes from the applicants, and there's another form, another section within FCDOT that reviews that. That is, they review our rezoning cases. So they'll be reviewing that traffic analysis along with VDOT. But it's up to the applicant to provide the traffic analysis. And I'm sure they will have to pay for their traffic consultant to do the work. It's not the county that's doing this work.
So Bob, let me chime in if I could. So conceptually, during the comprehensive plan stage, the idea is that the applicant proposes a general cap on something that they would like to do, up to, let's just say, 3,000 units and up to 50,000 square feet of something. And so the analysis that goes along with the comprehensive plan is set up to understand, okay, if we do that, can the traffic network work? And so the comprehensive plan is a general overall, let's see how this functions if we're proposing to do this. The comprehensive plan change only allows the ability, and someone talked about aspirational, it allows the aspirational ability for an applicant to be able to put in a zoning for their property to do something. The zoning is what really comes in and has all of the, this is when we're going to do things. It's more detail, it's more information about the specifics that are going to happen from the perspective of the buildings, from the perspective of exactly how many. There are proffers that say, okay, it's, you know, it's exactly 5,342 units. It's, you know, this many square feet of office. And then there are proffers that go with that that say, you know, as the applicant, we are going to do X, Y, Z. Here are the things that are going to happen. Here are the triggers for them. And here's how things are going to work. And so the comprehensive plan is the idea and the concept of what could happen, but there's still, you know, requires a zoning action that says, okay, now that we've had the opportunity, you know, I call the comp plan the opportunity. Comp plan says, I have an opportunity to do something. The zoning is the, okay, I'm going to now attempt to do it. And so when the zoning comes around, a lot of the same things that we're doing, talking about, analyzing, reviewing, and commenting on will occur again. And so there's another study that the applicant has to do that's, now that you know what's getting ready to happen, you got to put all that information in the study, come up with the specific solutions that you're going to do, and then they get proffered, and then that goes to the board to get approved. So it's the more detailed and more specific version of what we're doing now, which is the more overarching conceptual, how might we potentially implement this?
Greg, thank you. And Bob, Cheryl, are you okay with this answer?
Yeah, Greg, I really appreciate that answer very much, but I'm still a little bit confused about why we're using a lower density, and I'm, a little bit concerned about how the VTech commitment to supporting the comp plan is currently drafted fits into all of this. So I guess, if I think David and people in David's community have similar concerns, so I'll turn that over to David. Maybe he can articulate this better than I.
This is Mike Garcia. Can I chime in real quick
Sure,
before
please.
you all continue?
Yeah.
So the applicant submitted a certain density for the comprehensive plan to review. What they're doing is they are lowering the density from what they originally asked for. It's still more density than what's in the current comprehensive plan. So they still need a plan amendment to increase the density. So I hope that it explains it a little bit.
Yeah, I can, here, why don't I share my screen, Mike?
Okay.
And I think it will.
Before you do, Brian, let me see if I can get this straight for all the speakers, though. So I think I understand what you're saying. You're basically analyzing what you expect to be the actual zoning application they file, correct? That's what when you say a lower density?
That's no, that's, I don't know what they're going to file under the zoning.
Okay.
Brian can put that up, but what we're saying is that they submitted a certain amount of density to be considered, and then they're lowering that density from what they originally submitted.
Right. I'll give you I'll give you
If that's true, if that's true, then why are we in the comp plan approving a higher density or allowing a higher density that they're not going to build up to? Why wouldn't we just lower the density to what they're saying, what they're asking for now?
Yeah, I think Brian might tackle this. I'll let Brian tackle this because Brian,
thank you.
I think Brian will explain to you kind of the density aspect in the plan and what's going to happen there.
Okay.
That's right. So part of the reason why they would be lowering the density in their transportation impact analysis, as you can see here, there's a comparison between what we have planned currently, well, in the draft plan, right? Up to 900 dwelling units, 80 of which are townhomes, so 820 multifamily units and 800 townhomes, up to 120,000 square feet of office, between 105 and 120,000 square feet of office, between 10,000 30,000 of retail. That is different than what the applicant submitted in their first submittal of the TIA. It's less than what they submitted. So for example, you can see here, there are more multifamily residential units and townhomes in total. There are more dwelling units being presumed in the transportation impact analysis than what we are now planning for. And similarly, there's significantly more retail and that's assumed in their transportation impact analysis than what we are now contemplating in the draft plan. And that is part of the reason why they're lowering the land uses in the next submittal of the transportation impact assessment.
Right, and to chime in on that, so the information that Brian is showing on the screen that's highlighted, that's the information that we are putting in the plan, which kind of governs their maximums. Now, they could absolutely develop something less than that when they come in for their zoning, but those are the maximums that they're going to be able to develop if they come in for a zoning case. What we analyze is something higher than that, which the plan is telling us they can't do because the plan only has a certain maximum in there. So we've analyzed something that's much higher than they're going to be allowed to do at any point in time. And so it doesn't make sense for us to analyze something that's not possible based on the language we have in the plan.
But David, it's all higher than what's currently in the plan.
No, I understand that. I guess my question is, I think I'm understanding this, but I'm not positive that I am. If they're actually asking for something or going to be able, that's going to, why don't we, I don't mean we'd lower what's in the current plan, but like if the current plan is on one level and what we have put into the revised plan is at another level, and now it turns out they want some level in between, why do we not make
Hey,
that
David,
the
can I help clarify this maybe a little bit?
sure?
So the initial numbers that were shown on the bottom of that chart, which had, north of 1,000 apartment units or residential units, had a lot more retail. Those were numbers that our team developed before, 2 years ago, before we knew where we were going to end up with the plan, before we knew where we were going to end up with on FAR. It was back before COVID when we thought we'd have more retail on the site. So we did initially when you do your traffic impact study, because they're expensive to do, we were conservative and overestimated what we thought we would need from a traffic perspective so that we knew that we'd be covered if, for example, we ended up needing more retail or we ended up needing more apartments. As we've now refined our plan over the last 2 years and also through the task force understood that, no matter what, 0.96 is the FAR. We have now figured out, what we intend to build, and it is less apartment units and it's less retail. And it is in accordance with the 0.96 FAR that you're approving as part, or hopefully approving as part of the comp plan. So we recognized a few months ago that our TIS was overly conservative and had way more than we could ever build under the comp plan that is hopefully going to get approved. And so we, had a conversation with FDOT. Our new TIA that we will be updating will be based upon the more realistic numbers and the comp plan approval.
Are you going to be including A2 in that or not? Because you were only highlighting A1.
Yeah, we are not the developer of the Virginia Tech site. We're not making any changes to it, so that would stay the same as whatever it was before.
Yeah, but with regards to the traffic study, are you going to be including A1 and A2 together in the numbers, or you're just highlighting A1?
The traffic study will take into account the Virginia Tech site's full density potential and our site's updated full density potential. Yes.
Sorry, the traffic study, I believe that was submitted already is kind of in accordance with what we have in the draft comprehensive plan. It was with the WMATA portion where there was some disconnect between what would be permitted under the draft comprehensive plan and what they were projecting.
Yeah, Brian, what you just had on the screen with the 440 residential units and all that on A2,
yeah,
that's what's in the traffic study for that's going to be resubmitted. That's also what was in the traffic study back in September.
That's right. So as you can see, the top is what we have in the draft comprehensive plan, and the bottom is what was in the traffic study. So there's not the issue on the Virginia Tech portion of this this mismatch between the transportation impact assessment or transportation impact analysis and what's in the draft comprehensive plan.
Brian, what is this document you're showing us?
It's just something I put together earlier today.
Okay, so I was desperately going through my 20 pages of revised comp plan. It's not in there, right? Is this something that this is not something?
No, this is something that I put together a couple of hours ago. I'm happy to distribute to the task force.
Maybe you should, because we can take a lot more time up trying to really make sure we understand this, and it might make sense to make sure between now and the next meeting that we all do. Does anybody else have any questions on, well, let me just resume what my question was, though. If we have any more attendees who would like to speak on, I'm sorry, on any of these issues?
David, before we go to the
okay, Paul, go ahead.
I do have a question. We were brought on several detours, in my opinion, unnecessarily about the 2.5 FAR. At Virginia Tech. So once again, I'd like to return to it because it seems rather dense to me. And it affects a lot of things, including traffic that folks in your area are particularly concerned about. I would like to just, particularly because we now no longer have, this Public-Private Education Infrastructure Act project going on. Why is it, again, where did we get to this 2.5 and why is it that high?
The 2.5 FAR was is part of the scope of the board authorization, right? When the whole reason we're here, the board authorized this plan amendment as part of the stemming from the site-specific plan amendment process. Virginia Tech had asked to be included in that. I believe it up to a 2.5 FAR, and the board saw fit to authorize the plan amendment for us to study Virginia Tech at up to 2.5 FAR with the land uses that we're considering here: multifamily, residential, institutional, and retail.
So so why not 2.0? Why not 3? Why is it, you clearly are seeing in various ways from various people in the surrounding community concern about the density at the Virginia Tech site. I wanted to defer to others who want to talk about their sites, but now that they have 2.5 is still a bone of contention. We had something like, it has to be 115 feet, and then near us, and then Virginia Tech said we wanted to have 125 feet, and now it's down to 105 feet. That all relates to density, and there's just going to be these towers around us that in some way is affected by the density, and so why 2.5? Why not 2.0?
I can speak to the fact that this is a transit station, and we do, we generally plan for higher FARs adjacent to our transit stations because the county and the Fairfax County taxpayers have made a significant investment in the WMATA Metro Rail system, and we support that, and we support transit-oriented development. And ultimately we were authorized to look at 2.5 FAR, and I think part of that calculation was again in transit-oriented development in this area.
Right, and if you take a look, for example, it was that December 23rd Pecora email was an interesting one to me to read because it used the term minor arterial as it related to Haycock, right? So that's this minor arterial, which is, you could go take a look, you can put it up, you could go read it. He referred to Haycock Road as a minor arterial. And there are places with greater density that I'm aware of. It goes back to this issue of peer stations that I'd asked about a while ago, where, for example, Rhode Island Avenue has Rhode Island Avenue by it. And if you go into Clarendon, there are a lot more big roads around it. So now we have this 2.5 that's next to the minor arterial, Haycock Road, and that density and the buildings there feed into the traffic that we're going to end up dealing with. And now there is not a current proposal from Virginia Tech, so they can adjust themselves accordingly in the future. And I'm still leery of this 2.5 FAR and the rationale behind the 2.5 FAR. And I encourage you to read what Bob wrote and how he referred to Haycock Road in the December 23rd email that I got through the Freedom of Information Act.
Thank you, Paul. It's about 5 to 9. Chris, you must have your hand up from before, I think. Is that correct? Or do you have a question? I guess not. Let me look at attendees. All right. Anybody from anywhere have any more questions? Okay. Where are we here, Brian, on this? Because obviously we don't want to go an awful lot over where we are now, but there's still time.
That's right. Well, I don't know if there were any comments related to the updates from the task force. If there are any additional ones, of course.
Okay. Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
Are we going to see another draft before our next meeting or next number of meetings, whatever it turns into?
Yeah, I think we can put together another draft. Your association had proposed, I think, some changes that we can quite easily add to the draft, and I'd be happy to incorporate some of those and
Yeah,
distribute
thank
to
you,
the
Brian.
next
I think
meeting.
it's a good idea, and I would actually, that's a question that I sort of had. It was not clear to me, other than the point that Stephanie's group had made about the ADUs and being inclusive or exclusive, where it was conceded that that needed to be changed, but she made a number of other points, and it's not clear to me whether you agreed with those and are making the changes that she asked for.
Yeah, I think we generally agreed with them and thought that they were great recommendations.
Okay.
And similarly, David, I appreciate you sending some edits as well, I think earlier today.
Yeah, most of those were kind of small edits, but I did have a question that I think was related to Stephanie's, which I wasn't sure of when we were changing this to being inclusive instead of exclusive. I'm not sure I understood how that also affected the language about density or what am I thinking of? Bonus units. I'm not sure I
Yeah.
understand the whole issue.
Yeah, we're just reverting it back to what the previous text was in December. So
I'll look at
there'd be
that
no
because
change
I
there.
wasn't clear on whether or not, as with ADUs and WDUs, leaving the language alone means that you get more density, to add the bonus units. But it's the same situation. Is that correct? That should all be inclusive of?
Yeah, it'll be inclusive in the density. There will be no change in density from the the previous version, of course.
Okay. Anybody else, especially on the task force?
David,
Yes.
this is Darren. So I just
Hi,
want to
Darren.
confirm,
Yes.
yeah, just want to confirm it that we're going to vote at the next meeting and that the date of the next meeting is going to be in 2 weeks.
Thanks for bringing it up,
20th,
Darren.
yep,
I was gonna bring that up, yeah.
the third Tuesday, as is usually the case.
So if that's the case, Evan, can you really work with Stephanie's group within that time frame? So when she comes to the meeting, she's comfortable enough on this?
Yeah, we can start working on it tomorrow with you. So we'll email
Okay.
tomorrow and get a meeting set up.
Okay. I would like to think that we have basically then put to rest for now, at least the issue of whether or not the comp plan needs to include any more specific measures regarding Haycock and adjacent roads east of 66, because I haven't heard any real complaints that not enough is done, at least not at this meeting. I also don't know whether we are we, I'm a little nervous here because, I mean, my civic association doesn't like the density, I can tell you right now, but we're kind of in a particular position. But I had assumed that most people are going to support the densities that we had put in the plan. Are we on the verge of rethinking the densities? And maybe we ought to make, I don't know if that warrants some exchanges of emails in between meetings, although I know you don't like that, not in front of the public. But if we go into the next meeting suddenly wanting to renegotiate the densities, I don't know that we're going to wind up with a consensus at the next meeting.
I never said, David, I'm not saying I speak for a majority, but I never said I was in favor of a 2.5 FER. I think there are others who can speak for themselves who also are leery of a 2.5 FAR.
Well, all I'm saying is that when we went through the plan, a majority, and I don't remember how the votes came out each time we voted on a group of text, but at some point, a majority at least agreed on the 2.5. And so maybe none of us liked that to start with, and maybe we're still there, but I don't know whether other people are rethinking stuff. So that's what we've got in there right now. And I guess it'll come out when we vote.
David,
Pardon?
I don't know why we're relitigating something if it hasn't been brought up.
Well, I'm not trying to, but I've heard several people talk about the densities
That's
now,
fine.
and I'm just not sure whether.
We're relitigating it. Let's take it to the vote next time.
All right. Well, that's probably
we'll leave it where it's at.
Okay, that's probably how we will do it. Okay. But when I hear people bringing it up, I didn't know whether people
Just
were
because you hear
having
loud
doubts.
voices doesn't necessarily make
Darren,
it
just wait a
vote.
second. I understand your point. I'm simply bringing up the issue that if it becomes an issue with people for whom it wasn't an issue before, then I don't know what that does. I'll drop it at that. You're right. We'll just vote on it. And let's see, are we also all, are we comfortable with the idea, with the concept that we can vote next time, even though we may not have a VDOT approved TIA?
I am not.
Okay, all right. Okay. Well, mostly I don't, I guess what I'm saying is we've discussed it. I hope we don't have to actually debate it again next time. Yeah, I hope we're at the point where we can each decide, based on what we know now, whether or not we're willing to accept the plan the way it will be rewritten and presented to us between now and the next meeting, without having to actually go back and debate this point again. So I guess if we've got any questions about it, we ought to bring it up in the next couple of, or clarifications in the next couple of weeks. Okay.
It sounds to me like the plan that they presented to us earlier was the worst case, and the numbers have actually gone down. So what we saw, if we were comfortable with it initially, the only way it's only going to get better, not ever worse.
Are you talking about density or are you talking about traffic impacts now,
I'm
Cheryl?
talking about the traffic impact because that's what you just brought up.
Right. That was the answer they gave us, yes. Okay.
They gave us a worst case scenario because the density has gone down. Now, we haven't seen the new one, but it can't be worse than the old one.
That's not true. That's not true. Building density is not the same thing as population density. They could be fitting more people from whatever way through offices
The number of
or
dwelling
whatever.
units has gone down.
Yeah, but that's the dwelling units aren't the only source of people in this project.
Yeah, but
Their offices.
Cheryl's point is valid.
Yeah. Well, wait, I don't want to get into a debate. Well, let's not get into a debate about whether it's valid. Some of us are going to accept it. Some of us are not going to accept it.
Well, that's fine.
But no, it's okay. I'm not trying to get anybody's case, but we'll get into a long discussion of that now. I'm mostly trying to get some sense about whether we're going to have to debate this all over again next time, because I'd like to avoid that. I think we're each going to have to decide whether we're satisfied with that.
Well, David, we were given this document at 11:58 p.m. on April 1st.
Yeah.
And we have this meeting today on April 6th. So there are a number of us who actually are from this area and who care what the people in our area have to say. And so to simply say that they are, to use a legal term you're familiar with, estopped from commenting it on the future when they did not when we were not given enough time to consult in our respective communities. I just simply disagree with that.
Okay, if we need to discuss it next time because we've gone back to our communities and discussed it and need to bring it up again, I'm all right with that. I'm just trying to see where we are on that, because if we debate a whole bunch of other things that we've already debated now and that we should have maybe exhausted, I don't know how long the next meeting will be. But yeah, I'm not precluding a discussion of it.
Well, and to Paul's point, I don't think anything's off the table. I mean, we can always look at any issue we want at the next meeting before final vote, period, end of story.
Sure. Okay, yes. Okay. That's basically all I've got to say. One last chance for anybody else to speak up on anything here. Attendees. Looks like they're all asleep. We've fascinated them all again. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Are we ready to call it quits then, Brian, or do you have anything else you want to make an announcement about?
Yeah, I think so. So the next meeting will then be on April 20th at 7 p.m. I'll post the WebEx registration link online ahead of time, and of course distribute it to you all so you can send it to your community members. I'll post the recording of this meeting online. as well. Like I said, the document that I pulled up on the screen earlier, I'm happy to distribute that to the task force, and we'll send an updated draft of the plan before the next meeting. Thank you all for attending.
Yes, thank you.
I
Thank you,
really
everybody.
appreciate all of your participation and your guidance in this process.
Thank you, everybody. See you in 2 weeks.